Good evening. Tonight's story is Jikininki by Lafcadio Hearn. It was originally published in 1904 in his book Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things. This story involves a Zen priest who is very Zen indeed, and a most unusual monster. So now, let's open our imaginations and begin. Once, when Muso Kukushi, a priest of the Zen sect, was journeying alone through the province of Mino, he lost his way in a mountain district where there was nobody to direct him. For a long time he wandered about helplessly, and he was beginning to despair of finding shelter for the night when he perceived, on the top of a hill lighted by the last rays of the sun, one of those little hermitages called anjitsu, which are built for solitary priests. It seemed to be in a ruinous condition, but he hastened to it eagerly, and found that it was inhabited by an aged priest from whom he begged the favor of a night's lodging. This the old man harshly refused, but he directed Muso to a certain hamlet in the valley adjoining where lodging and food could be obtained. Muso found his way to the hamlet, which consisted of less than a dozen farm cottages, and he was kindly received at the dwelling of the headman. 40 or 50 persons were assembled in the principal apartment at the moment of Muso's arrival, but he was shown into a small separate room where he was promptly supplied with food and bedding. Being very tired, he lay down to rest at an early hour, but a little before midnight he was roused from sleep by a sound of loud weeping in the next apartment. Presently the sliding screens were gently pushed apart, and a young man, carrying a lighted lantern, entered the room, respectfully saluted him, and said, "Reverend sir, it is my painful duty to tell you that I am now the responsible head of this house. Yesterday I was only the oldest son, but when you came here, tired as you were, we did not wish that you should feel embarrassed in any way. Therefore we did not tell you that father had died only a few hours before. The people whom you saw in the next room are the inhabitants of this village. They all assembled here to pay their last respects to the dead, and now they are all going to another village about 3 miles off, for, by our custom, no one of us may remain in this village during the night after a death has taken place. We make the proper offerings and prayers, then we go away, leaving the corpse alone. Strange things always happen in the house where a corpse has thus been left, so we think that it will be better for you to come away with us. We can find you good lodging in the other village. But perhaps, as you are a priest, you have no fear of demons or evil spirits, and if you are not afraid of being left alone with the body, you will be very welcome to the use of this poor house. However, I must tell you that nobody except a priest would dare to remain here tonight." Muso made answer, "For your kind intentions and your generous hospitality I am deeply grateful. But I am sorry that you did not tell me of your father's death when I came, for, though I was a little tired, I certainly was not so tired that I should have found any difficulty in doing my duty as a priest. Had you told me, I could have performed the service before your departure. As it is, I shall perform the service after you have gone away, and I shall stay by the body until morning. I do not know what you mean by your words about the danger of staying here alone, but I am not afraid of ghosts or demons. Therefore, please to feel no anxiety on my account." The young man appeared to be rejoiced by these assurances, and expressed his gratitude in fitting words. Then the other members of the family, and the folk assembled in the adjoining room, having been told of the priest's kind promises, came to thank him, after which the master of the house said, "Now, reverend sir, much as we regret to leave you alone, we must bid you farewell. By the rule of our village, none of us can stay here after midnight. We beg, kind sir, that you will take every care of your honorable body while we are unable to attend upon you. And if you happen to hear or see anything strange during our absence, please tell us of the matter when we return in the morning." All then left the house, except the priest, who went to the room where the dead body was lying. The usual offerings had been set before the corpse, and a small Buddhist lamp, a tomio, was burning. The priest recited the service and performed the funeral ceremonies, after which he entered into meditation. So, meditating, he remained through several silent hours, and there was no sound in the deserted village. But when the hush of night was at its deepest, there noiselessly entered a shape, vague and vast, and in the same moment Muso found himself without power to move or speak. He saw that shape lift the corpse as with hands and devour it more quickly than a cat devours a rat, beginning at the head and eating everything, the hair and the bones and even the shroud. And the monstrous thing, having thus consumed the body, turned to the offerings and ate them also. Then it went away as mysteriously as it had come. When the villagers returned next morning, they found the priest awaiting them at the door of the headman's dwelling. All in turn saluted him, and when they had entered and looked about the room, no one expressed any surprise at the disappearance of the dead body and the offerings. But the master of the house said to Muso, "Reverend sir, you have probably seen unpleasant things during the night. All of us were anxious about you. But now we are very happy to find you alive and unharmed. Gladly we would have stayed with you if it had been possible, but the law of our village, as I told you last evening, obliges us to quit our houses after a death has taken place and to leave the corpse alone. Whenever this law has been broken heretofore, some great misfortune has followed. Whenever it is obeyed, we find that the corpse and the offerings disappear during our absence. Perhaps you have seen the cause." Then Muso told of the dim and awful shape that had entered the death chamber to devour the body and the offerings. No person seemed to be surprised by his narration, and the master of the house observed, "What you have told us, Reverend Sir, agrees with what has been said about this matter from ancient time." Muso then inquired, "Does not the priest on the hill sometimes perform the funeral service for your dead?" "What priest?" the young man asked. "The priest who yesterday evening directed me to this village," answered Muso. "I called at his enjitsu on the hill yonder. He refused me lodging, but told me the way here." The listeners looked at each other as in astonishment, and, after a moment of silence, the master of the house said, "Reverend sir, there is no priest and there is no anjitsu on the hill. For the time of many generations there has not been any resident priest in this neighborhood." Muso said nothing more on the subject, for it was evident that his kind hosts supposed him to have been deluded by some goblin. But, after having bidden them farewell and obtained all necessary information as to his road, he determined to look again for the hermitage on the hill, and so to ascertain whether he had really been deceived. He found the anjitsu without any difficulty, and this time its aged occupant invited him to enter. When he had done so, the hermit humbly bowed down before him, exclaiming, "Ah, I am ashamed! I am ashamed! I am very much ashamed. I am exceedingly ashamed." "You need not be ashamed for having refused me shelter," said Muso. "You directed me to the village yonder, where I was very kindly treated, and I thank you for that favor." "I can give no man shelter," the recluse made answer, "and it is not for the refusal that I am ashamed. I am ashamed only that you should have seen me in my real shape, for it was I who devoured the corpse and the offerings last night before your eyes. Know, reverend sir, that I am a Jikininki, I, an eater of human flesh. Have pity upon me, and suffer me to confess the secret fault by which I became reduced to this condition. A long, long time ago, I was a priest in this desolate region. There was no other priest for many leagues around, so, in that time, the bodies of the mountain folk who died used to be brought here, sometimes from great distances, in order that I might repeat over them the holy service. But I repeated the service and performed the rites only as a matter of business. I thought only of the food and the clothes that my sacred profession enabled me to gain, and because of this selfish impiety I was reborn immediately after my death into the state of a Jikininki. Since then I have been obliged to feed upon the corpses of the people who die in this district. Every one of them I must devour in the way that you saw last night. Now, reverend sir, let me beseech you to perform a Sigake service for me. Help me by your prayers, I entreat you, so that I may be soon able to escape from this horrible state of existence." No sooner had the hermit uttered this petition than he disappeared, and the hermitage also disappeared at the same instant. And Muso Kogushi found himself kneeling alone on the high grass beside an ancient and moss-grown tomb in the form of a 5-circle monument, which seemed to be the tomb of a priest. The best sentence in this story is, "Strange things always happen in the house where a corpse has thus been left, so we think that it will be better for you to come away with us." This is an ancient story, but it could have been written today. Seriously, it has all the horror movie tropes. Ancient traditions say that nobody in our village can stay here overnight. What? There hasn't been a hermitage on the hill for generations. Ah, I was evil in my heart, so I was doomed to roam the earth as an undead creature. You could seriously sell all of this in a screenplay right now. At the very end of the story, Hearn starts to load in a ton of very long footnotes full of references and explanations. I think these footnotes are very interesting, but of course they don't work very well in this audio format, and it can be really annoying to have a bunch of side commentary just at the climax of a story. So, let's examine these footnotes a little more closely now. Firstly, the word Jikininki. Hearn says in his footnote, quote, "Literally, a man-eating goblin. The Japanese narrator gives also the Sanskrit term Rakshasa, but this word is quite as vague as Jikininki, since there are many kinds of Rakshasa. Apparently, the word Jikininki signifies here one of the Baromun Razetsu Gaki, forming the 26th class of pretas enumerated in the old Buddhist books." End quote. Okay, so there's a lot in this footnote. Apparently we have this footnote because there are almost no other references to the word Jikininki, so it requires some explanation. Preta is a Sanskrit word that means ghost or the spirit of a dead person. As the term moved from India into various Eastern religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and a lot of folk religions in China and Japan, the word has come to mean hungry ghost. In life, they were a false, corrupted, or deceitful person, and then after death, they become afflicted with an insatiable hunger or thirst, typically for some repugnant or humiliating food. In order to purge their karma and pass on to the next cycle, their family has to engage in specific rites in order to free them. In China, there are various rituals and festivals, like the Hungry Ghost Festival, and they are held to feed and to appease these spirits. In Japan, there's a national treasure called the Hungry Ghost Scroll, which depicts the world of these creatures and various stories of their salvation. Rakshasas, meanwhile, also originated in Hindu mythology, and they are also malevolent supernatural beings frequently associated with eating people and or drinking blood. But I agree with Hearn. The original Japanese author was probably not referring to this kind of supernatural evil creature, but to this type of hungry ghost. There's a footnote also for the Sigake service referred to in the text. It's a special Buddhist ritual said to free restless spirits. I think we've encountered that elsewhere on the channel. I think it was in Miminashi Hoichi. Finally, the 5-circle monument of the priest. In the text, Hearn used the word Gorin Ishi and added this footnote, quote, literally 5-circle or 5-zone stone, a monument consisting of 5 parts superimposed, each of a different form, symbolizing the 5 mystic elements ether, air, fire, water, and earth. End quote. I think today this thing would be called a Gorin-to, a 5-ringed tower. It is a specific type of Buddhist pagoda, typically used for funerary purposes, and each stone that is stacked in the pagoda is a different shape that represents a different element, making up the 5 elements. The use of these specific types of pagoda dates back to approximately 1100 AD. They are widely in use today, and they've lost a lot of their more mystical Buddhist associations. Finally, naturally, the insatiable Jikininki does make me think of the American Wendigo originating in Algonquin folklore. However, the Wendigo is said to be a type of evil spirit that possesses human people, causing them to commit acts of violence and cannibalism. In some Native American myths, other acts of insatiable greed and destruction are also attributed to the Wendigo. It's sort of the embodiment of gluttony and greed. In most instances, the Wendigo must be killed in order to end its path of destruction, but there is Cree folklore that says you can treat and perhaps cure the Wendigo with a diet of animal fat and grease, and that they may vomit ice during the process. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you'll get to hear me make a little confession. This week's confession is that I haven't yet read virtually any new material for the channel this year. I'm trying to push through and record all the good stories I found last year, which is fine, and I'm glad to do it. But that element of search and discovery is one of the things that I love the most about this project, and I haven't yet had much of it this year. I keep stumbling across segments of stories or names of books and authors that I want to look at more closely, but instead I just add them to the list and I try to buckle down on what's already on my plate. Unfortunately, from your perspective, that might mean that we're doing a lot of revisiting of authors and topics that have already appeared on the channel, but with different stories. I hope it doesn't come across as being repetitive. I don't think it will because it's still such a small channel, and new people are still discovering this content, and of course they are listening in a different order than I am recording, so they're navigating their own path through the videos. It's actually pretty interesting to see how different videos drive traffic to each other. Last week's Delft Cat has apparently caused a lot more interest in last year's Cat Who Walked by Himself. Anyway, I am really looking forward to the next phase of research and content discovery for this channel, where I get to take on board all of the feedback and the experience that you guys have given me this year and dig into new authors and topics. It's going to be very exciting. Thank you so much for joining me on this little adventure. If you want more weird old literature in your life, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Choose notifications so you never miss a story, and I will see you beautiful people next week.